away. Like, it's like, I just couldn't believe it. Like, she had nothing going for her, like nothing, and yet she wanted to, you know, help some people that were worse off, and like, there just weren't that many people that were worse off than her. Mind-boggling, mind-boggling, and I never forgot it, and it really blew me away. So, you know, there are opportunities for elevating your sights within your realm of capability, wherever you happen to be, and that's interesting. It's strange that that's the case. She brings those who love, that's what that should say, the sweet fulfillment of their secret longing, like a bolt out of the blue. Fate, characterized here as feminine, and that's what happens in the movie. The movie's got a Christian underbelly, like, it's quite pronounced, but it's really a pagan movie in many ways. So, for example, there's no blue fairy and the reason I'm speaking of Christianity, of course, is because this movie was created in a culture where Christianity was still reasonably intact, and of course it was fully informed by that, but the underlying mythos is not precisely Christian, even though it's informed by Christian imagery. There is this old idea, I think it's a Gnostic idea, that the wisdom of God is feminine, something like that, and anima, which means soul, is feminine, and so there's an idea like that lurking here. And anyways, that's fate, and that's the blue fairy in this particular movie. You know, she comes down from the star, which is kind of makes her an avatar of God. That's the idea, and she's the transformative agent. She's really Mother Nature, you know, in her positive guise, and that's why she can animate. To animate something means to infuse it with soul. That's what it means. And she animates Pinocchio, right? She's the force that frees him from his strings, and so that's her. Fate, like a bolt out of the blue, fate steps in and sees you through. Well, what that means, it means something like this, is that, you know, if you orient yourself properly in the world, and we'll say that you do that by trying to attain the ultimate goal, whatever that happens to be, then it's as if the world is on your side, and things go well for you. And I also believe that's true, because certainly one of the things that's more or less self-evident is that, generally speaking, if you tell the truth, things go a lot better for you. And the reason for that is, well, do you want to have reality opposed to you, or do you want to have reality backing you up? It's like, it's a pretty straightforward question. If you're truthful to the degree that you can be truthful, then reality is on your side. That's a good thing, because there's a lot of it and there isn't much of you. Whereas if you take a deceitful approach to things, then, well, then you're challenging reality. It's like, good luck with that, man. It's like you're holding a plastic ruler in front of your face and bending it, you know, and at some point you're going to let go, and it's going to, all that force that you've stored up, and it's going to snap back and nail you, and that happens. Like, I've just never seen anyone in my clinical practice ever get away with anything. Nothing. And it's not surprising. It's like, if you're going to mess with the structure of reality, like, it's going to mess back, and it does, and it might not happen for years, and you might not even notice the connection. I mean, part of what you do in psychotherapy is actually make those connections. It's like, why did this horrible thing happen to me? Well, who knows? It's like, let's take it apart. Well, who knows how far back we have to go? It might even have things to do, not even with you, it might have things to do with the errors in your parents' relationship. Like, you just can't mess with the structure of reality. It stays warped until you straighten it out, and it's not good. So there's an injunction here, which is that, you know, if you follow this path, you pick a high goal and you put your heart in it, you know, you commit to it, believe in it. Believe means to love. Believe and be love is the same thing. It means to act out, and that's what the belief means. Like, we think belief means to accept a set of propositions as true. Well, that is one form of belief, but that's more like factual knowledge, right? Belief is more like you decide that you're going to act something out. You make a decision and then you act it out, and that's a reflection of your belief. You know, it's you're staking yourself on something. Do you know? Well, no, because you can't. You can't know. You're bounded by ignorance. You can make your best guess and move forward, and you can do that with commitment, but you have to believe in order to do that. I guess that's why it's a wish. Okay, so fine. Well, then we have Jiminy Cricket. That's southern US slang for Jesus Christ, by the way. and the initial overlap isn't a fluke. I mean, I'm sure the animators thought that was funny, and of course it is funny. And you know, in The Lion King, you know that baboon who's the shaman, basically? Well, to begin with, he was kind of just a comic relief character, like a fool, you know. But one of the things Jung mentioned about the fool is that the fool tends to turn into the savior. It's an archetypal reality. Bugs Bunny is sort of like that, you know, he's a trickster. And as the movie developed, the character of the fool baboon took on the full-fledged, you know, shaman priest element. And you know, okay, well, Jiminy Cricket, he's this little cricket, and he turns out to be the conscience, which is pretty damn weird. It's like a bug is your conscience, and a bug is JC, and it's like, that's a very strange juxtaposition of ideas. Conscience, insect, savior. It's like, what's up with that? And so, well, what bugs you? That's part of it. Well, your conscience certainly bugs you, and you should pay attention to it. It's just a little niggling, annoying thing that you can't quite, you can override it, right? Obviously. But it's this, well, and he says, when he talks to Pinocchio later, he says it's that still small voice, you know. And I've asked people before, like in my personality class, like, because conscience is a weird thing. And like, if I said to you, if you're about to do something that you know you shouldn't do you have a voice in your head that tells you that you shouldn't do it? So how many people have had that experience? Okay, good. Now, so other people have a feeling instead of a voice. And so is there anybody here who's willing to admit it, who has neither the feeling nor the voice? Okay, so, and you know, it's a very understudied phenomena in psychology, this conscience. I mean, people can be conscientious, and maybe those are people who listen to their conscience more. I don't know, but nobody's ever investigated it. And the fact that you do have this little voice, whatever it is, inside your head, it's like, well, what the hell's up with that? You know, and it doesn't tell you what you want to hear, at least as far as I can tell. Now you could say, well, that's the internal representation of society operating within you. That'd be a Freudian view, that's the superego. And certainly there's something to that, but I don't think it's necessary to presume that that's all there is to it, and even if it is, you still wouldn't have the voice if you didn't have the biological potential to have that voice embed itself in you. So even if it is socioculturally constructed, which it is in part, it's like language. It's like your language is socioculturally constructed, but the reason you can speak is because human beings can speak. And if you have a conscience, it's because human beings have a conscience. And the contents of that conscience might differ, but the fact that it exists, what seems to me to be universal. Okay, so, well, that's the conscience. And that's Jiminy Cricket. And then the cricket opens this book, and then you look at the book, and you think, well, what kind of book is that? Well, it's got a spotlight on it. So it's being highlighted. This is an important book. And what kind of book is it? Well, it's leather bound. It has a lock on it, you know. It's not some cheap book. It's kind of like you might think about it, looks like something from an old library, or maybe it looks biblical, whatever. It's a major league book, and this bug is the introduction to the book. So does that mean your conscience is the introduction to the book? Well, maybe that is what it means. It's certainly what's being played out in the movie. Well, then the cricket opens the book, and so then what do you see? Well, what does that look like? What does it look like? What does it remind you of? Okay, so that's the Van Gogh painting. It's a nativity scene. It's the Christmas star. And you know that because what's going to happen? Well, the hero is going to be born. That's what happens, and so a star signifies that. Well, why does a star signify the birth of an infant, let's say? Well, because there's something miraculous about the birth of an infant. And why would the infant be a savior, which is the Christian notion, say? Well, because that's what the infant is, potentially. Every infant. And so that's how you should act about them. And you know, one of the things that really is interesting about having little kids, and I loved having little kids, is that you have this opportunity to have this pristine relationship with someone, like a relationship you've never had with anyone, because the kid really is just there to love you. You're like, if you don't screw it up, you've got that. And then you can keep that going, you know, and you can try to keep that relationship like pristine, and that's so fun. It's so fun to try to do that. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. And you know, kids get a bad rap in our society, but it's an amazing thing to have little kids. And they are remarkable, and they give you back far more than they require from you, and partly because they treat you like you're you're valuable beyond belief. That's what the kid thinks about you. It's like, that's pretty good. So yeah, it's like something divine is going to happen. And so, okay, fine, you know, fair enough. Well, there's the star signifying that, and that's associated in some way with this star that you're supposed to wish upon. Well, that's kind of odd. Like there's this relationship that's implicit. The star that signifies the birth of the hero is the same star that you wish upon. Well, perhaps the star that you're wishing upon is the wish that the hero will be born in your soul. It's something like that. You're aiming at an ideal, right? It's the ideal you, whatever that would be. Well, you can certainly figure out what it isn't. That's where you start, as far as I can tell. You know what you shouldn't be doing, and you could at least stop doing those things and then see what happens, you know. And if you ask yourself, it's a meditative exercise, you know. And you do this with the autobiography to some degree. It's like, okay, sit down for 10 minutes and have a little dialogue with yourself like you actually wanted to know the answer, you know. So you ask, well, I'm probably doing something stupid that if I quit doing, my life would be better, that I could quit doing, that I would quit doing. And maybe it's not a very big thing because you're not very disciplined, but maybe there's something. Ask yourself that question, man. You'll have an answer in no time flat. Like, well, I should stop doing this. It's like, yeah, I know, and I could, and you know, I won't, but, or maybe I would, but if I did, I know my life would be better. It's like, you can figure that out immediately. And if you do that 100 times, well, you'll be in way better shape. So if you don't know what to do that's good, you could at least figure out what you shouldn't do that's just moronically, you know, pathetic, and you can be sure you're doing like a dozen of those things at least. You know, procrastinating, or, you know, everyone, that's what the conscience tells you, and if you ask it, it'll just tell you why you're, you know, stupid and insufficient. And so, who wants to hear that? But maybe you could do something about it. Okay, so the cricket comes into the village there, and he sees this like little house, and there's a little fire in it, and so it's kind of got a welcoming place. It's a light in the darkness, this house, just like the star. And so he hops towards it, and then he ends up inside it, and you know, there's a nice fire, and you get to see the inside, and the inside's, it's cozy, you know, it's welcoming. And then when you look around, you see that everything's kind of in its place. It's not hyper organized or anything like that. It's friendly and welcoming, and there's a lot of wood, and there's a nice fire, and then there's toys everywhere, and they're well constructed. So you know that whoever lives there likes children. And so if someone likes children, well, if someone doesn't like children, it's like you should run away from them very rapidly. But if they like children, well, then that's a good sign that, you know, Jesus, they're at least human. It's a start, you know. And then these things are all high quality. They're made very well. And then he's looking around to see all of this, and there's toys, and there's clocks, and they're all handmade. And so he sort of infers that maybe there's a woodcarver who lives there, and a woodcarver is someone who can build things, and if you build things that work and that are beautiful, that's a kind of truth, right? It's like, it's built right into the object. That's what quality is. Quality is the building into an object of truth. The thing works. It does what it's supposed to. It has integrity, and so you see that everywhere in here. And so you're getting a sense of the filmmakers are setting the stage, and so, well, so they set the stage by showing you the stage, and the cricket tells you what he sees, and he's pretty happy to be there because. And this is also someone who's concerned about time, right? Because there's a lot of clocks, and so time turns out to be an important sub-element of this story. And then he sees the puppet, he's a marionette. And so what's a marionette? Well, a marionette, and he's sitting on the shelf, a marionette is something that's quasi-animated, because it can move, it doesn't really have a soul, but it sort of acts like it has a soul, in the sense of anima and soul and animated. But a marionette is something that is being manipulated by something else behind the scenes, right? It doesn't have its own volition. It's dependent on the will of something behind the scenes. And so there's a strong implication that whatever this thing is half formed, and that it's being manipulated by unseen forces behind the facade. Well, that's a Freudian idea. That's you, that's all of you. You know, you're pulled hither and fro by unconscious forces, and some of those are biological and some of them are cultural, you know. And you think about people who are swept up in great ideological movements like the communists or the fascists, is like, those people are marionettes. That's exactly what they are. They all say the same thing, they all mouth the same words, they all act the same way, and something's behind it. and the question is what? Well, that is the question, and that's partly what this movie tries to figure out. So you see this marionette, he's a half-formed wooden-headed puppet, and he has a little bit of potential, you know, and the cricket goes up and interacts with him and sees that he's made out of pretty good wood and makes a little joke about having a wooden head, and you know, that's kind of obvious what that means. And you notice the cricket is dressed like a tramp, and when you first saw him he wasn't, he was dressed like a 1920s millionaire. So but here he's a tramp, and this is so interesting. It's like, so this bug that's a messiah, that's the introduction to the book, that's the conscience, is also a tramp with no home. It's like, what does that mean? And it took